Thank you. Thanks for the nice invitation, and I must say that I'm a bit nervous because this is my first presentation where we actually share the slides, so it can be kind of tricky with the timing especially, but I'm very happy to be here to be able to present our work. And although normally I speak to roboticists, I think it would be nice to hear from you and get feedback, because you're a bit different audience with respect to what I normally talk to. And I guess that's the same for you. So we're going to be talking about the iCub, which is this project that we've been running for now many years. It's a human robotics project, but with, I think, ramification in different domains, in different fields. It was born as a platform to share research, so to be a shared platform for research in different domains. Why? Why are we doing human robotics in the first place? There's I would say, a principal reason for doing that, which is connected to these numbers. These are from the United Nations. It's a number that is called Fertility Index. It's very simple. It says how many kids are born per couple worldwide. And what is happening worldwide since actually 50 more years is that the population, or the number of kids, are getting smaller and smaller. I mean, there are less kids being born. The population will stay constant if this number is 2.1. What's happening in Europe, especially, but also in China and in Japan and in North America, is that this number is around 1.3, 1.5 maximum, which means the population will get older, because luckily medicine is doing great, and so we're getting older and older, and this means that we may have, actually in 2030, which is not so far in the future, 850 million people over 65 of age, which means that there's a huge opportunity for technology to step in and help these people. And robotics may be a possible solution. And in fact, this is the scenario we would like to address by designing the robots, but also making these robots more autonomous and more social, using artificial intelligence, and by developing research in a number of subdomains, which include computer vision, for instance, include automatic speech recognition, and include also control, because eventually the robots have to move. Last but not least, human-robot interaction, which is a very important topic for robots that have to interact with us in daily life, as we imagine in this scenario. So we started some time ago, to be more precise, in 2004, a project called RoboCab. This started as a European project initially, and the goal was actually to design this platform, this humanoid robot, to be shared among researchers working in different fields. As I say, from computer vision to artificial intelligence to control theory, rather than human-robot interaction. And we wanted to have a platform to be usable by many different researchers. And we took a number of decisions when we designed the robot. First of all, we wanted to have hands, because a robot without hands is not really a robot. We wanted a robot that can manipulate the environment and be useful. We also wanted to have human-like sensing, and in particular, something that wasn't available was tactile sensing. So even in robotics, even today, there are not that many robots that have touch as a sensing modality. There are a few solutions, but things are difficult. So we invested quite considerable effort and money to develop tactile sensors for the robot, so that the robot can really feel, if you hug the robot now, the robot will feel that you hug the robot. Last but not least, we made the entire project completely open source under GPL license. So exactly like Linux, we decided to give everything we do to the community, because we reasoned that the problems are so difficult, there's no hope that me, with my group, no matter how large the group could be, can really solve these problems. We really need a community effort. And these are some of the results. I mean, we designed hands, so the robot can now identify objects and grasp them. And so this is working, this is done. We designed tactile sensing. As I said, we managed to cover the entire body of the robot with this tactile technology. This is not very different from the smartphone touch screens. It's just customized to work well with the robot, and also it's soft. Not unlike the touch screens, this one can be conformed to the robot's body. This allows this type of interaction, so you can really touch the robot, and the robot is gentle, like it's shown here. So the robot is not stiff. And this is important because whenever there's interaction with people, you want the robot to be compliant, as is shown here. If you disconnect the skin at this very moment from the robot will stay stiff. So it requires really the sensing in order to move this way. And we made an investment in software development to promote the open source, let's say the open source philosophy of the project. We spent a lot of effort in designing a software API that allows the robot to be programmed by people that, I mean, are roboticists, yes, are engineers maybe, but also to connect to different communities, like psychology, for instance. And this was the case in the project from the very beginning. We had groups working on the project that weren't engineers, that weren't computer scientists, that required a bit of support from us. This ended up being the seed of the community. These are numbers taken from a website called OpenHub, which builds statistics on all the open source projects worldwide. And we ranked in the top 2% in terms of traffic, let's say, in terms of accesses and commits. And if you look at the numbers, it's not very readable, but just to have an idea, in the last 12 months, we had about 5,000 commits from 124 people. So, meaning there's a community that's probably around 200, 250 researchers at every given moment in time working on our repositories. And if you look at the numbers here, not that it means much, but there are 3 million lines of C++ code at the moment in the repositories that control, let's say, the behavior of the robot. Doesn't mean much because this is not something we control directly. It's a shared effort, so I don't know anything about the quality of the software. Actually, it's sort of checked, but it just means that the community is large, and we're happy about that. We actually got quite interest on the platform itself, on the hardware, and people started asking us to build a copy of the robot. So the robot is open source, so theoretically you can download all the drawings from the website and then build the robot. But I mean, building hardware is difficult, so normally they came to us and say, could you build a copy of the robot? And of course we did. And these are the robots today, as of today. There are 5 at IIT in Genoa, because those are the robots we use in our labs. And the rest is everywhere, including Japan, which for us, starting from Europe, was quite an achievement because we say, well, the Japanese, the leaders in a sense in human robotics, are asking us to build a robot for them. So we're very proud of this good success. And the robot was also very successful in the media. Very briefly, I think this one, well, you recognize this one. It made Angela Merkel smile, which is not easy, that's what I say. I mean, we were very happy to get this type of attention. I wanted to say that this wasn't easy. Driving a community of researchers together on an engineering project like building a human robot is a bit like herding cats. So cats are difficult to herd, and there are cats that are even more difficult to herd, which are the non-roboticists, the psychologists. In fact, we connected to the psychologists.
All right, so now I'll tell you my story, and it's my first encounter with iCub. That was back that was back when I was in Munich, at the Technical University in Munich. And I was there as the only psychologist in a lab of engineers. And basically I was hired there to do research on human-robot interaction with different robots. So you see that the lab was equipped with all sorts of robots. There in the picture you can see that. And there was also iCub. And I got intrigued by iCub because it was cute. And I saw that people's responses to iCub were very vivid, and iCub was extremely evocative in these responses. I had a very vague idea about the Institute of Technology in Italy. So it was just proves the point that we were part of that community. We were there in Munich, iCub was there, and I saw iCub, but it was a kind of separate institute where research was done also on iCub. So since I'm a psychologist, as Giorgio mentioned, I had a completely different interest in approaching robotics. And for me, the point was looking at those people, and even myself, how they react to iCub. I asked the question, what sort of characteristics do robots need to have to engage people in an interaction, to make people react to them socially? So I got interested in the question of social cognition, mechanisms of social cognition in interaction with artificial embodied agents such as robots. So those mechanisms that we employ with each other on a daily basis, can those mechanisms also be evoked by an artificial agent? We ran a super preliminary experiment back then, but it was first step towards a huge new adventure about which I'll tell you in a second. This experiment was to understand whether humans have a sensitivity to human-like characteristics in behavior. So the idea was that, you know, robots can behave very mechanistically, so they can have very jerky movements, or they can be very smooth. Like you see often in cartoons, the movements of the characters in cartoons are very human-like. And that type of human likeness, very in behavior, sometimes very, very subtle, is extremely important for reception of those robots. So I won't go into detail of this experiment, but basically what we've done here is that we presented our participants with the iCub robot that had different eye movements. And in one condition, those eye movements were actually modeled after human behavior. So we asked our participants to behave in a certain way, so to have reactions to stimuli, and then we copied this behavior on the robot. That was one condition. And another one, the robot was behaving completely mechanistically. And then we did another task. We asked participants to do another task with the robot. The question was whether they would sense this sort of human likeness in the robot. So this was our setup. What you can see here is a participant in front of iCub performing the task, and this is zoomed in iCub's behavior with the eyes. As I say, I'm not going to go into details of the experiment, but the participant is asked at some point to say whether the robot, they think the robot is human-like or is pre-programmed. And interestingly, participants had sensitivity to human-like behavior, even though they were not really aware of that sensitivity. So when we asked them whether they knew what they based their judgment on, they couldn't tell us, they confabulated, but they could detect the two different conditions, and that was very interesting. So these mechanisms are very subtle, and this is what we psychologists are interested in, human-robot interaction. Now, this experiment was my first challenge, and the challenge continues. Challenge of speaking with engineers and trying to make this happen, actually. There's a huge challenge in doing truly interdisciplinary work. And theoretically, we all know that that's the case, but the moment you really want to do something and translate your questions, or in our case, psychology questions, to the language that is understood by engineers, to explain to them what do we need from the robot actually, how it should behave, what sort of like level of control do we want to have at the robot's side. That's something that is, well, back then in Munich it took me pretty much almost a year to get to the experiment actually going and explain to engineers what we need. Right now we're getting better, and so it takes a bit less, but that story I will leave for a moment later. So the constraints that we have on cognitive neuroscience or psychology perspective are completely different from constraints of roboticists, and we need to find common grounds, and we need a lot of patience actually to talk to each other. And yes, we need to translate the languages, but basically for me and any sort of psychology lab, the advice would be whatever you want to do with a robot, with any robot that you want to buy, you need to have, even though you think as a psychologist you're a good programmer, no, you need well-skilled roboticists or people who have at least sufficient training to program those robots for you. And in our lab back in Munich, we had a person who was well-skilled because the person was trained in a specific school that Giorgio will tell you about.
So basically, most of the people that were participating in the community, including the people in Munich, attended one of our hackathons, which we organized starting basically at the beginning of the project. Since the moment we had the robot to play with, we organized sort of summer school hackathons where people will do training, but not in a very, not just getting lectures, but programming the robots. So we bring the robots in a place, typically it's a beautiful place in the Italian Riviera, which is not bad for, especially in the summer. And they can sit there and work on the robots. This, I think I trained a good number of people, and I'd like to show you a small film made by one of the students that actually attended the school. So this year was the 7th edition of the school, and very happy of the results, especially I saw all students participating and being very late at night, which I think is commendable.
So we're working in a group of more or less 6 people, and we're trying to make the iCub work in 5 days.
Identifying and modeling the nonlinearities present during torque control.
The force sensor to detect how much concrete force we have.
So, but in a nutshell, is that the robot should be able to learn speech and manipulation at the same time.
A model which involves only 3 things, such as actions, objects, and the effects. And we're trying to incorporate the 4th thing, which is tools.
Tools relate to the actions and the objects and their effects. In the end, we hope to retrieve some data.
Collected a lot of data, was doing some kinesthetic teaching.
Emulgent computation using the recurrent neural network.
Deep learning. So the deep learning to use the robot system is very interesting.
Learning activity representations from humans from the demonstration.
The goal of my program is to make iCub learn the rules by playing with us.
Please make up to me.
I am not ashamed, it's kind of Korean.
The problem we have is for the speech recognition itself in this huge room, so you had to try it with better microphones.
It turned out to be quite well. We broke the robot's hand twice already.
The robot is playing phone, it cannot move.
So one of the problems that the robotics community is facing now is that it is very difficult to take a software written for one robot and use it for another one. So one of the ideas, one of my dreams, is to improve the software architecture of the iCub and make it very, very easy to download an application written by somebody and test it on your robot.
Okay. So for instance,
a less robot generator working.
So we have
Pleasure to meet all these people.
It was really nice to collaborate with people.
I learned a lot of things and amazing people. We really enjoy being there.
Nice people, nice environment, nice weather. What should I have more?
We have to come back in the next year.
So in the last part there were students presenting. Each student had to actually implement something on the robot by the end of the school. The school was only 10 days long, so imagine what it meant for them. Arrive there, install the software, day 2 they were already moving the robot and programming, because 10 days is not that much time. This allowed, for instance, additional connections and additional, let's say, worldwide dissemination of the iCub project in a sense. In particular with the University of Plymouth in the UK, we had another European project together that allowed to explore, for instance, deep learning on the robot. This is an example of the robot reenacting trajectories that have been learned using a deep neural network. And this was, the project started in 2010, so it was a very beginning, in a sense, of the, let's say, deep learning renaissance of the latest few years. And in particular, they were already using GPUs implementation, which is, again, something relatively new. Now it's very popular, but at the time we were doing this was kind of nice and unique. To say that if you have a community, it's very easy also to spot new directions, new trends, because somebody will see a possibility in a certain piece of technology. And this, I think it's the beauty of the project, and people got very inspired, and you know, going around and spreading the knowledge about the project really got a lot of people inspired even more. And
all right, so you might remember when I was telling you that we had a completely different take on research with iCub, because we look at the human in interaction with iCub. And I was telling you about the mechanisms of social cognition that are engaged in everyday interaction, sometimes very subtle. So this is something that I continued that line of research, and in this little video you will see examples of these sort of mechanisms that I'm talking about. So very, very subtle and kind of reflexive mechanisms. So if I suddenly point my head there, you will probably attend there as well. This is called joint attention. This is something we use on a daily basis. When I nod, you might be nodding with me. And the question is whether humanoid robots evoke similar mechanisms in humans. So this little video will demonstrate a handful of such mechanisms. Mutual gaze, extremely important for joint interaction, pointing to communicate intentions, then communicating understanding of the intentions to your interaction partner. Then some level of joint action and cooperation, because we understood each other's intentions very well. And since it worked well, the joint action, there is some sort of emotional synchronization. We're both happy. And this is what happens on a daily basis between humans. The question is whether we can have the same level of social attunement, what we say, with humanoid robots. So these ideas made me sit for a few months and write a grant proposal, which was luckily successful. That was an ERC grant that I received a year ago. And with that grant, actually, which allows researchers to take it wherever they feel is the best place to carry out the project, I decided to go to the Institute of Technology in Italy, because I thought, okay, now I have an entire grant written on human-robot interaction with the iCub robot, and I really need good support of engineers to help me out with actually running those experiments that I have planned. So I went to IIT, and I said, here is my grant, would you like me to work with you? And they were very happy to have me, I hope. And so that's how the current research started with me moving from Munich to Italy. And I'll just tell you in a few words what is the approach of our, within our research within the ERC grant. The idea is that we first measure human-like behaviors. So as with the example that I just given you, imagine there would be a super loud sound somewhere there in the periphery. I would probably turn my head there. Maybe you would follow my gesture. But I would turn my head with human-like characteristics. So there would be a certain velocity of the head turn. Sometimes I would turn my head, sometimes not. I would only select relevant sounds probably. So these are human-like characteristics, those very low-level kind of parameters. So we measure them on the humans. And then as the second step, we want to copy those parameters on the robots and see whether people detect a difference. So this is kind of what we call some sort of nonverbal Turing test to check whether people detect the difference between a human-like or mechanistic behavior. And then once we see that there is a difference, how much do humans attune, so evoke those, how much those mechanisms of social cognition are evoked, dependent on whether the robot is perceived as human-like or not. So this is like a general approach within my grant. And these experiments are now being conducted at IIT. And one example of such an experiment is this one. Here you will see joint action between a human and the iCub robot. And what happens is that the robot uses gaze in an action scenario. So the robot is to pass a bottle to the participants. And what happens with humans? When you want to manipulate an object, first you look at it and then you grasp, right? That would be a typical behavior. When I actually first came to IIT and I saw a robot grasping, I saw this. This is very unnatural, right? So first grasping and then looking doesn't make any sense. You first look to know where you should grasp. And so this is one of the examples where, as psychologists, can give guidelines to roboticists how to make robots look natural and behave in a human-like, natural way. And here in this experiment, we are looking into exactly this, because what happens when I look at a bottle and then I will probably grasp it. Because I look at the bottle, you already predict that I'm going to manipulate it. So your brain is ready to be prepared for a certain change in the environment, meaning the grasping. In this experiment, we look at violations of those expectations. So the robot sometimes looks and then grasps, sometimes looks at the bottle and grasps something on the other side. And then we see what are the reactions of the human. In this video, you will see that the robot and the human are engaged in action, and the human is wearing an eye tracker here, so we're measuring eye movements of the human in response to the actions of the robot. So what you see is that there's first mutual gaze, then the robot looks at the bottle, and then actually grasps the other one. So this one is a violation of expectations for the humans. Then the human takes the bottle, and then you will see from the other perspective how does it look, so that the participant here is wearing an eye tracker, and we're able to analyze eye movements in those conditions where the expectations were confirmed or violated. The results of this study, we are actually right now analyzing the data, show us one very, very interesting thing. So that first of all, that participants focus on the face of the iCub robot a lot, so it is engaging enough, and that would be the case also with another human. And then, actually, when the robot is just about to grasp, they follow the gaze of the robot. And here are heat maps. So this is the more red the color, the more fixations on a particular space. So you see that participants look basically at the at the robot head, face, and then at the arm and at the bottle, which confirms that the robot is very much engaging and engages those mechanisms of social attention. Because people were to ignore the robot or didn't care that much, maybe they would have to look somewhere else. Okay, so basically, I hand over to you.
Yeah. Thanks to all this research, actually we're taking also inspiration ourselves, roboticists, on how to improve the robot. So the iCub is not there forever. Technology evolves, so similarly we evolve in the hardware of the robot. At the moment we're designing, for instance, or we're building the next version of the iCub, which is called 3.0. We have also ideas of how the robot should look in 2020 or maybe later, whenever we manage to actually design the next one. The idea is to continue giving the robot or implementing on the robot new skills, new abilities. And more recently, there were modifications, for instance, in the legs, so the robot to allow the robot to balance and to walk, something that we didn't foresee at the beginning of the project. And in particular, this idea of having a skin, so being able to sense the environment and to see the same environment allowed us to implement something like a peripersonal space for the robot. So it's not only social interaction, but also physical interaction that we can take into account. This is an example where the robot is using vision to identify a person, to see how the person is moving in 3 dimensions, and to avoid the contact with the person. So the robot was trying to move in a certain way. The person put the hand there too close to the robot, and the robot stopped and tries to stay away from contact. You can imagine this in a cooperation scenario where the robot has to avoid contact with the person and try to be careful how it approaches the person. So this can be controlled, and therefore it's a possible direction of investigation. This is another one where the robot is balancing, and again it's the same technology. The robot can sense the environment, can sense contact with the researcher, and try to balance in spite of the disturbances that are being that are arriving or gaining from the environment. And these are all possible directions that require also evolution of the platform. So the fact that, again, we give it the platform and we have a community sort of drives us in doing new things. And this is one other example. Also, more recently, we thought of designing a real robot for the ultimate application, which is this idea of servicing people or helping people. And the iCub is a bit too complicated to be a real one, so it's good for research, but we thought maybe we can simplify it a bit while reusing the same technology. And this is an example. It's called R1, which is the kind of the bigger brother of the iCub in size, but younger in the sense that has been designed more recently. This was something we did in only 16 months, starting from scratch. So we took whatever our experience, and we started talking actually to industrial designers because we wanted a nice shape. The robot had to be on wheels because we couldn't guarantee that the legs are always stable and the robot doesn't fall and hurt somebody. Although it's small, I mean, it can hurt your pet, for instance, because the robot is heavy enough. And so we went for wheels for stability, and imagine that this was one of the designs proposed by this group of industrial designers, and was the easiest one to actually make into a real robot. And we started really from a sketch and made into 3D full robot, as is shown here. This video we see, in a sense, this final application. We've taken all the research that was done on the iCub. The robot, by the way, is software compatible with the iCub, and made into an application where the robot can go around the home, bring an object for you, and actually take it to you, like a glass of water in this case, very simple. But it gives an idea of what the robot can do. So here the robot uses vision, uses sensors to avoid obstacles. It can grasp an object. It also has tactile sensing, like in the iCub, same stuff, and can eventually bring the object to you. So this is basically where we're going, sort of a future directions, but this is a bit unexpected in a sense. We didn't start from here, but the requests from the community kind of led us there. And we have ways to have impact.
Right, so as you probably can guess already from this presentation, is that This enterprise, that is an enterprise of the entire community, has an impact on very many domains. Scientifically, of course, there are contributions not only to robotics, like it's specified here, but also to domains such as cognitive and social neuroscience or psychology, because we, that's my approach, with the use actually of the humanoid robot, we learn something about the human social cognition, what happens in humans. So there's a lot to be said for fundamental science in various disciplines. Then there is, of course, contribution also to society in terms of educational applications, robots for education, and how to improve communication with students. As I was saying, we are trying to design robots that are well attuned to the humans. That attunement will help in communication when we introduce support, such as robot support in classrooms, which is already happening in the world. Of course, there's also commercial applications, robots for entertainment, and finally, clinical applications, such as robot-assisted training and therapy for children with autism. It has been shown that children with autism respond very, very well to robots. And it's quite surprisingly that robots can evoke mechanisms of social cognition in children. Children that have been diagnosed with autism, who very often do not interact with their parents or peers, don't speak, don't engage in joint attention. This that I mentioned just earlier, like a situation where I point and you would turn there, children with autism wouldn't. Surprisingly, when they interact with robots, they do. So there is a lot of opportunity here to use robots to help training social skills in autism, and this is the direction we're actually going. And also elderly care, as Giorgio mentioned earlier. Okay, so I hope we convinced you with that this line of research can lead to very, very large spectrum of applications, and both in research and society. And these are our teams that deserve a thank you. Very, very large team of Giorgio here. All these people who I'm very grateful to, because we call them every second day and say, there's a problem with iCub, please help. and then one of these people help us. And my team here, a team of mainly cognitive neuroscientists and psychologists, with one technician on board, this person here, who's in close communication with the iCub facility, and then the tools that we use on the human side, as I say, we use sensors such as EEG or the eye tracker that I mentioned earlier to measure the mechanisms of the brain, and then we have our iCub and our lab as well.
And I'd like to finish with a vision of the future, which is actually a little story from Isaac Asimov's I, Robot, the book, not the movie. The story goes, I mean, it's a short section of the whole book, but I think it was significant. When I read it, I felt really thrilled, in a sense. There's two people talking, and one says, how old are you? And the second replies, 32. And the first says, oh, then you haven't experienced the world without robots. The thing is that there will be probably a future where our, I don't think kids, but whatever, grandchildren will have familiarity with robots, or will be probably living with the robots. This is a vision, a possibility. And there's another nice message here, that the robots are friendly. And what we're trying to do in our research is making friendly robots, in fact. I mean, robots that can really be interacting with us in daily life. And think of that. I mean, our children, at least our children, never experienced a world without the internet, without computers, without digital music. I mean, these are all things that were born before they were born. And I think it's amazing. It's really, I don't know how Asimov managed to do this, but I think there's one final message. Maybe one day we will forget a world without robots. as today. I mean, when I was a kid, if I had to meet a friend, I had to agree before leaving home, because once I left home, there was no way to communicate. So if you arrive late, okay, meeting gone. Well, now you call each other. So you forgot what was the world without smartphones. Now, you know, maybe we get to that point also with robotics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's now time for questions, comments. So maybe I will start. The first question is purely technical. I've seen that this robot has plugged in his back the cable. So that means it goes to the power supply or a central unit. How large they are? Are they big still?
It can go on. It can go on battery. We have a version with a backpack with a battery. It's the battery itself is about 3 kilos, so it's not super huge, and can power the robot for a couple of hours, which is not a lot. So energy is one of the problems to be solved for autonomous machines. We don't want a robot to be running like a smartphone, so you make a couple of phone calls and the battery is low. So you need the robot to be operating for longer periods of time. So there's a technical challenge there.
And the central unit of the computer is in the robot, or it's also outside?
No, it's also
it has to be a powerful computer that probably needs a cooling and so on.
There are, so the robot can be connected Wi-Fi, and there are for the experiments we're running, typically there are about the equivalent of 30 to 40 cores running for the experiment, plus GPUs, whatever. So it's fairly...
It's a huge computer.
Huge computer, and noisy. That's why the computer is somewhere else.
So I get also 2 commentaries. One, when the lady was grabbing the cup from the R1 robot, I expected her to say thank you, and the reaction of the robot. I was disappointed that it didn't come. She ignored him. And it is in that point of view of this what you say, that the robot's supposed to be a partner of us, so she ignored him. The other thing that I love, and I talked to a friend, and it's the reaction when the robot tries to keep the balance. My 18-month-old granddaughter grabbed my iPhone, and she immediately lost the balance because the iPhone is too heavy for her. What she has done here, she has stretched the leg, and I make a photo from the other iPhone that I have. So I got it, and she looks identical almost. She's of course more pretty.
Of course.
So there were 2 commentaries. If there are any questions, please.
I would like to ask you what is the overall weight of the robot, because you said it's really heavy.
It's about 25 kilos without the battery, 28, 29 with the battery, which is not super heavy. It's comparable perhaps to a child of the same size. The robot is only a meter tall, but still 25 kilos falling.
Yeah, but there are electrical engines and magnets and so on that are always heavy dust. You can't avoid it. It's that sort of. I got a question, but I don't know if it's fair to ask. How much did it cost till now, this project?
The project, about 30 million euros, approximately.
It's close to much. It's a reasonable money.
No, I mean, this is considering the team,
the number of the people,
and the European projects, which I think were about a dozen European projects that supported the development of the robot. So if you calculate, everything is around that number.
How do you communicate with it? With him? With her?
With it.
With iCub. How do you communicate? Orally, or you type something?
Depends on the experiments, of course. It depends what part of the software you run.
Will you transfer other?
The speech. The speech. It depends on the researcher, the team, what they're developing at a particular moment. Normally, for us, we use speech, because if you're using the robot, it's very convenient not to have to type anything. So you run the software, and then you talk to the robot, and you interact in sort of scripted way, because the robot is not very intelligent to understand everything, but enough run the experiments
so
without.
What language you are using?
English.
That's obvious. Of course, in the smartphones we've got like Siri. You know,
Yeah,
you can talk to it. It's learning quickly. And it's adapting to your way of speaking and accent all the time.
May I have a similar comment to yours, Professor? Because when I was watching one of the films, the robot reminded me exactly of my 2-year-old granddaughter. And I thought how indulgent we are to children. So if the robot was childlike, we would probably interact with it much more happily. Although if it was assigned some serious task, we wouldn't trust it. So I suppose it might be food for thought for scientists.
That's definitely a factor. The appearance of the robot plays a major role, and this is also one of the questions we're asking in our research: how much appearance changes. Here, for the purposes that we have of social interaction and evoking those mechanisms of social interaction, perhaps it's even because it's childlike, it's enhancing those mechanisms. We have participants of our experiments going out of the experiments with crazy sometimes comments. So in some of our experiments, the robot looks down and then does something. It's a little bit sometimes cross-eyed, and participants love it, and they say, "Oh, it's really so shy and it's so timid. We would like to." So there's a lot of attribution of various features depending on behavior plus appearance. Of course, if you have other type of tasks, like in a factory, you would then probably employ iCub to an industrial setting. So.
But if I may also make a comment that as a language teacher, I find your lecture really inspiring and giving me some hope for teaching engineers, especially at the Faculty of Robotics, that we need to teach them about human interactions, because that will be something they have to take into consideration.
I'm pretty sure that it's not quite as Agnieszka said that. It's, I think, more difficult for engineers to understand psychology than vice versa. Because people are more and more familiar with new technologies. And with the problems, solving the problems from the psychological point of view, it's not that easy. I'm pretty sure. This way it's more difficult, I would say.
I would say that it's also the first step, and the first difficulty is for us to convince engineers that it's important that the robot is like socially, yes, and that the behaviors are kind of natural, and that this, these topics are important. So that's the first step. Luckily, I'm happy in IIT that people that in IIT people are finding this interesting enough and it's important enough.
Okay, so thank you once more.